it's the Filmist, and we're going to do something that I haven't done in about 5 months. It's a pickup video, or a haul video, because pickups don't really exist anymore since we live in hell. It's completely off the cuff, it's unscripted, so I apologize if I ramble or if I take pauses. You know, I usually write these things out, but I want to go back to basics, and I want to do one of these videos because I haven't done them in so long, and it's what seems to bring viewers to the channel, if any come at all. So, there's a lot to go over. As you can tell, since the last video, my collection's grown exponentially because that's just what I do, including this stack that's right above my head and this book. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to go ahead and start off with the haul that just came in today. So without further ado, so I'm probably not going to have a pickup this big for a while, but I had a little bit of extra money, so I decided to splurge. With all the money that's going toward other attendant things being well reserved and well taken care of, so I thought it was a time to pick up some of these things and replace certain things, and here we are. The first one that I want to get to is this, one of my favorite pieces of animated anything ever made, and it is Todd McFarlane's Spawn. Now, this is only DVD, but this is the most recent transfer and release of this that you can get. This is one of my favorite pieces of anything ever. I'm a fan of the comic, I guess you could say. You know, I think it definitely got better once Todd McFarlane wasn't writing it, and once Greg Capullo took over the art. What started off as kind of this weird, strange rip-off melange of like The Crow and Ghost Rider and The Prowler and Venom kind of became this religious, apocalyptic epic that was filled with all sorts of intricacies and cool stuff. I really enjoyed it because, you know, outside of film, one of the things that I study the most is religion. It's what I was my minor in college. This animated series takes the storyline, I guess, of the first 5 issues of the comic and elaborates on it and brings to it the tone that the later issues would carry, that of like a horror comic. So this is, it's incredibly dark, it's incredibly mythic, it's grandiose, it has this really sorrowful tone all throughout. It has just this insane nightmarish imagery that just like to this day still lives in my head. I mean, it's like it's an influence on certain things that I write. The animation style is so beautiful in this, inspired by Todd McFarlane's love of stuff like Akira and Batman the Animated Series. It's kind of a blend of those two, especially in seasons 2 and 3, where the style becomes a little bit more reduced in the first season. It is legitimately, I think, one of the unsung classics of 90s animation. It is everything that this character could be if it wasn't, if the character wasn't brought down by, let's say, less than complicated aesthetic impulses, like with the film, which I still enjoy as a guilty pleasure, or like with certain issues of the comic, which are just like the worst ideals of 90s comics taken to 11. As a matter of fact, probably responsible for some of them. But this, it's haunting, it's nightmarish, it's mythic, it's beautiful, it's emotional, it's tragic, it's heartwarming, it's heartbreaking, it's just a synergy of just a million different great things, and I love it. So that's one. Alright, so that's part 1. We're trying a different angle now because I realized that the last shot was slightly out of focus, and I don't want to redo it because I really like the monologue that I just went off on. So I am conscious of it, bear with me. My second pickup I'm very excited about as well. I'm a huge proponent of silent filmmaking and visual storytelling, and in particular I'm a huge fan of the early Soviet experiments in montage, in what I guess became known as Eisenstein's, you know, theories and things like that. And one of the figures in that movement who was analogous to Eisenstein and Pudovkin was, of course, Ziga Vertov, and I hope I'm saying that right. Of course, one of those names that you don't really say in common conversation very much, so I apologize. This is Fleecker Alley's release of The Man with a Movie Camera and some of his other related works like Kino Eye, Enthusiasm, and Three Songs About Linen. I do know that Man with a Movie Camera was actually just released by Kino, um, but their transfer doesn't seem to be getting as sterling of reviews as this edition does. I actually saw this in film school. I've never actually had a copy of it myself, which has been a huge blank spot in my collection for a while. This is almost this is not, I guess, like Eisenstein or like even I guess the American silent filmmakers who were more experimental in what they were doing, like Buster Keaton, who I still herald, some don't, but who I still herald as one of the most rigorously experimental and visual storytellers of the 20s. This is much more abstract, and it is very much about a juxtaposition, and it's very much about what I think is funny is that it's very much reflective, of course, of Soviet philosophy that also guided a lot of those filmmakers back at that time. This is very much it's organized chaos in this film. Much is made of layering. Um, it's one of the most brilliant. I can't really think of ways to describe it in certain terms because um, I have always been more drawn to the narrative filmmakers of the movement, but it's seriously brilliant, and I would suggest picking up this copy from Flicker Alley, whose restorations, at least stateside, are immaculate. They're amazing, and they're one of the smaller boutique label companies out there. So definitely find this if you can, especially for the supplemental material, which is, of course, about, well, like I said, it's about, well, it's three of his other full-length films, which are important and related to this in terms of their theory and their philosophies, you know. So, yes. It also, of course, includes a booklet. Uh, Seriously fantastic. And, of course, like a lot of their releases, it also includes musical score by Alloy Orchestra. And, well, two of them, actually. And Robert Israel. And there are original soundtracks restored for Enthusiasm and Three Songs About Linen. And also a newsreel that he made, Kino Pravda 21, which was made in 1925 to mark the first anniversary of Lenin's death, you know, so there's that political influence again. I would say on that and on this, just to take a quick digression before we go on to pickups again, I want to talk about this book that I have hidden underneath this stack of what looks like garbage, but it's not, I promise. This book, which I'm rereading right now, goes into, at length, a lot of the early Soviet filmmakers and experimentalists, I guess you would call it, and why editing kind of became the preeminent focus of a lot of their experiments rather than any other piece of filmmaking itself. Juxtaposition and finding meaning through collision of shots rather than through any specific thing in the frame. This book is, of course, The Technique of Film Editing by Carol Rees and Gavin Miller. Find it if you can. It's a bit older, and it's not up to date, I guess, past the 70s, really, or the early 70s. But the lessons and principles that it espouses are no less significant or clear. So definitely classic and influential. Pick it up if you can. Let's see what's up next. This I picked up as the Criterion segment of course, my pickups, you know. There's a big one coming this month, and y'all all know what it is. It rhymes with Schlong Schlar Shtui box set. But in the meantime, I wanted to go ahead and fill in a blank space from a filmmaker whose works I haven't explored very much, but who I have seen and, you know, have watched bits and pieces of his work, and also have read some of his short stories because he, along with the other Nouvelle Vague filmmakers of the French movement, the Cahiers du Cinema movement, I don't speak French, I'm very sorry, but I can read it, I just can't speak it. This is Eric Romer. Eric Romer and his Six Moral Tales box set, restored in Blu-ray by Criterion. This is a fantastic edition. I can't wait to dive into this because I love the French New Wave filmmakers. I love all of them. Truffaut, Godard. This is what I know of Eric Romer is that his films are a bit more mannered than I think those were, because a lot of those films were anarchic, I guess, if you could describe them in one sense. They were experimental rigorously, as well as being self-aware of that. These films are very much that, but they're also more about conversation, and they're a bit slower and things like that, which I really respond to as well as, being a guy who loves action and visual storytelling and movement. This edition, the preeminent extra on this edition, if any of y'all have any desire to pick this up, is the fact that it includes the book by Eric Romer that many of these stories were based off of. That's fantastic, and I love when Criterion does that. I don't think they've done that since. The last major one by itself was Picnic at Hanging Rock, and then there was also Vampire by oh my god, my brain. There was also Vampire right here, which is by Drar, which includes the screenplay, essays, and things like that, and also, of course, the short story that the film is based off of. I love when they do that because it kind of gives you this all-encompassing view of the film and where it's come from. As you can see, I'm always trying to shift things around. I have to get new shelves. That's just how it goes. Other extras include short films by Romer, Presentation, which took 10 years to complete, Veronique and Her Dunce, Nadia in Paris, A Modern Coed, and one in which he was kind of like the assistant director, which is The Curve from '99. There are TV episodes on Pascal from the educational TV series In Profil dans le Texte, which is directed by Romer, which is about Blaise Pascal, the philosopher. I'm sorry if I'm murdering any of these French names. I really do apologize. I don't really have much chance to bring up these filmmakers in conversation. There is, of course, archival interviews with Romer, actors who are featured in his films like Jean-Claude Brialy, Beatrice Roman, Laurence Dumonian, Jean-Louis Trintignant. I'm so sorry. Film critic Jean Duché and producer Pierre Cottrell. There's a video afterwards from 2006 by filmmaker and playwright Neil Abute. Neil, okay, see now it's endemic because I'm doing it with every name now. There's trailers, plus a whole booklet, as is Criterion's one, in addition to the book itself, which features essays by critics Jeff Andrew, Jeanette Vincent-Dow, Philip Lopate, who's always great, Kent Jones, Molly Haskell, and Armin White. I say that like it's shocking, but outside of his contrarian views, Armin White actually is a very respectable name in film criticism, and at the very least does stand by his bones sometimes, except for when he says stupid, offensive things. I really do like his films I really do like his piece on Happy Feet. I think it was one of the only pieces that actually understood at least a little of what that film was doing at the time, past being it's a really dark kids movie. So that's fantastic. We also have excerpts from Nestor Almendros' 1984 autobiography, which I'm sure concerns working with Romer, and Romer's essay for a talking cinema. So this is quite a substantial package, and it's one of the most important pieces in the French Nouvelle Vague, or French New Wave. This is immaculate. This is just a fantastic piece right here. I haven't opened any of these because they literally just arrived today. And the man with the movie camera, I actually had to go wait by the mailbox because it was supposed to arrive about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I think, and it finally just arrived. It got lost somewhere in transit because we had a giant snowstorm that kind of destroyed life in Texas. So that's that, The next one is um, in preparation for an article I'm writing, and it's also a guilty pleasure by itself. This is, of course, Street Fighter on DVD, because I'm not going to buy this on Blu-ray. Directed by Steven D'Souza, screenwriter. I'm actually writing an article coming up whenever it's done. I'm not going to put a date on it and just disappoint anybody. About early 90s video game adaptations concerning specifically the top three, the three most important ones in the early 90s, which were Super Mario Brothers, Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat. I want to look at how they all approach the idea of adaptation and with their three games, and specifically their approach to what are basically non-narrative stories, I guess, or that's not totally right because those games did have stories or narratives rather. Actually, I guess non-narrative stories is a good way to put the approach that I'm taking and how they all fashioned cohesive filmic narratives out of them or failed to, as is the case, as well as looking at their production woes, some that they shared, some that were individual to them, and of course their aesthetics overall that they share and that are unique to them. So this one I've always loved as a kid. Street Fighter, which is funny because it's actually the second adaptation of Street Fighter that came out in the early 90s. The other one, I actually just got on Blu-ray up there. It's out of frame, but it's the amazing anime adaptation, which was something I saw when I was very young, and it was the first pair of animated boobies I ever saw. I still think this is pretty great. It's fun. It's really, really fun. I mean, it's goofy, and the production was a complete mess, and apparently all the actors were addicted to Thai massage parlors the entire way through, and Raul Julia was dying from cancer, so it was not a cohesive production, we will say. But through it, the fact that it was made in tandem with Capcom, which is in contrast to a lot of video game adaptations, means that what you're seeing in the film, the atmosphere that they're bringing, the goofy, over-the-top nature of it, outside of certain cosmetic changes in terms of like who's the main character focus, which is Guile in this, as opposed to Ryu from the games and also from the anime, outside of certain specific things like that, this is part and parcel of like one of the closest video game adaptations you're ever going to find. I mean, they remove the tournament aspect, which I think is fine because everything else kind of remains the same. Even down to the costumes, they find places for the special moves, which is, and it's a ton of fun. The performances are great. It's actually really, really funny. This is one of my favorite films that I used to watch when I was a kid, actually. It's just, it has the last performance of Raul Julia, who is one of the greats of acting. He's dying. He's in pain in every scene, but you wouldn't know it. He's such an immaculate professional the entire way through, and of course, it led to the birth of like one of the famous memes, which is, for you, when bison graced your village, it was the most important moment of your life, and for me, it was Tuesday. I love that. It's great. It needs to be recognized as the hopeful, willful failure that it was. And it was the first directorial, and I think maybe the only one, by Steven D'Souza, who was so scarred by this that he never went back to it. And that's a shame, because it was a mess, and he was kind of thrust in at the 11th hour, and he had no idea what he was doing, and he admits that fully. So, I still think he pulled off a first effort pretty okay. We have, finally, I picked this up. I've been meaning to pick this up for like a year and a half now. Shout Factory's release of Drag Me to Hell. This is an interesting film. It's one of my favorites by Sam Raimi. It's curious because he spent so long before this making the 3 Spider-Man films, which are goofy, optimistic, but they're still his. Clearly, they're still very much his, but they're not tonally of a piece, at least in terms of their material or subject matter, of anything that he had done before outside of Darkman, I guess. This film is very much a return to form to early Sam Raimi. It is uh, filled with over-the-top dark humor. It's filled with outrageous, like, slapstick horror comedy. It's filled with some genuinely terrifying sequences and moments that, like, only he can do, with, of course, his trademark verve and, uh, 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 we'll say, humorous viscera. You know, I don't need to tell the ones that are watching this channel about this film. I'm sure that you've all seen it, and if you haven't, then you need to see this, because directly after this, I believe his next film was Oz the Great and Powerful, and no one came out of that proudly. So, forget that film. Remember, he is, in fact, a master. You know, there's that. Next up, I am fleshing out my Billy Wilder collection, which currently includes, I think, 4 films by him, and I love everything that I've seen, so I'm trying to watch through more of his filmography. And this includes The Lost Weekend, which has just recently been released by Kino Lorber. This is, basically it's a look at alcoholism and its devastating effects, and it's about a writer who, goes off on a bender, which is something that, I kind of relate to on a very uncomfortable level, hashtag moderation management. That being said, this edition is one of Kino Lorber's more sparse editions that they've released. I've seen demonstrations of the restoration. I saw this a long time ago, but I saw it in an unrestored version on an older DVD. This doesn't have much to it, as well as the next film that I'll be talking about that's also from Kino Lorber. It has an audio commentary by film historian Joseph McBride, who is always great on everything that I've ever listened to him do. He's fantastic. That's going to be wonderful to listen to. With radio adaptation. And I love when those are included, because it kind of gives you a different sense of the way that this narrative can be transposed into a different medium, and of course what's required from doing that. And also they're just plain fun, because I love radio, if you can't tell by my voice, which this is not my real voice. I don't usually speak this clearly or succinctly. This is, it's frayed since, obviously, but this is a voice that I picked up from doing a little bit of radio, and that I also picked up from doing a little bit of acting. This is not my voice in usual conversation. Even if it doesn't sound that good right now, it's because I don't have a script. So yes, pick this up if you can, especially in tandem with Arrow's release of The Apartment, which is one of their best releases, Arrow Academy rather, that came out a few years ago, and it was a real hustle trying to find it, because it went out of print like that. This is a standard edition, so you'll have no problem finding it and getting it delivered next day. Billy Wilder is one of the most overwhelmingly cynical filmmakers in early Hollywood, and you can feel, along with Alexander McKendrick, you can feel, although in a different way, because Alexander McKendrick, I guess, relied more on like barbarous dialogue, I guess, and verbal sparring. With Billy Wilder, the cynicism just washes over you through every frame. In The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, especially Ace in the Hole, and this one is no different. Alcoholism is a very touchy topic for me, because it's a topic that's affected both people I've known, family members, and it's something that I'm also wary of as well. This is probably one of the most sobering looks you'll find at it, but also one of the most schadenfreude-y, I guess, as well. So definitely pick it up. It's a masterpiece. The next one I'm picking up because once again, like all of these, I saw it a long time ago. I actually saw this in film school, and I'm revisiting it. This is Brighton Rock, directed by John Bolting, which is a classic of English crime gangster films of the 40s. I'm actually revisiting it now because with this reread of film editing, there's a ton of stuff that they're talking about with this film, shot, reverse shot, the pacing, and of course the the continuity of a lot of moments. It really is a textbook as well in late 40s editing in genre filmmaking. This is, of course, a very, very dark and a very cynical film. It is not happy by any means. It is not optimistic. It is one of the finest film noirs you will ever see. The photography is just immaculate. Every frame could be a painting. Reach out, Tony Zhao. We hope you're doing okay. And of course, it has a script which was written by Graham Greene, of The Third Man, as well as, of course, his other literary outputs, which are all in the same vein. It also features a performance by the great Richard Attenborough, which is just amazing. This, like the edition of The Lost Weekend that I just showed you, is one of Kino Lorber's more standard and less thorough editions that they've released. It's still great. This is probably the best restoration you're going to find of it on the market, but it only really includes a trailer for the film and an audio commentary by Tim Lucas, who is always great. This film is... I had a weird... I have a weird association with it because when I was learning about this film when I was in college, one of my favorite songs to listen to constantly was Brighton Rock by Queen, which, shares the same DNA, so it was kind of like this weird emotional synergy that was happening there. So those are my film pickups. I'm very proud of them. This is one of the best hauls that I've ever done in one fell swoop in a long time. Now, there are other things that I picked up that I want to show you. Jump cut. So the other pickups that I had, as well as being a obsessive film collector with a problem, I'm also getting back into comic book collecting, which I've shown off in one previous video. I'm getting back into comic book collecting because I feel next to film, it's probably the most visual narrative art form. And of course, there's a part of me that is just really just playing into superheroes, but not just superheroes, but I really think that, contrary to some people, I do think that there is aesthetic worth in the superhero narrative, and so I'm really into stuff that takes it and stretches it. One of these in particular is one of the more recent works that does that. That is All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, which is one of my favorite works that I've never owned. My brother does, and it was his copy that I read. Grant Morrison is a very interesting writer in terms of comics. He has... His works are filled with magic theory, chaos magic theory, because he's a practicing magician, much like Alan Moore. It must be something in the water in England. Although I, at one point, was also a semi-practicing novice chaos magician as well at one point in my life. But this takes like a very wide-open view of the Superman mythos. It just includes everything that it can into it. It's a love letter to the character and everything that he's been and everything that he is in a very, very mythic and archetypal and I would say even Jungian, for buzzword's sake, way. It's astounding. It's just perfect. It has art by Frank Quietly, who for some people I guess is an acquired taste. For me, I really like him. Some people have problems with the way that he does faces. I don't. I think that his line work and his sense of kineticism is, especially within the one frame, is fantastic. It's, one of the best. I love everything about this comic. I've always loved everything about this comic. It's very much kind of like, I would say, and I could be wrong, but I think it's very much inspired by the Trials of Hercules, because it's about Superman finding out he's going to die, and thus he has to go through, do all these things before he gets to that point. And I want to talk about the cover art for a second, because I think when we talk about the cover art, and what went into it, we can really begin to understand this comic's philosophy towards Superman and why it understands the character so well. This image of Superman just lazily relaxed on a cloud, not a care in the world. Initially, when they were writing the comic, and this was actually the cover for the first issue, I think, or the second, when they were writing it, or when they were putting together the first issue anyway, there was some discussion about having a more traditional comic book cover, Superman in some kind of action pose or whatever. But Grant Morrison said, that's not really who Superman is. Why would he be like that? This is a man who can't be hurt. This is a man who, who's seen everything, who's done everything, who can do anything. He wouldn't have a care in the world. He would just be completely sedate, floating on a cloud, at ease, much like a human would be if they'd been given the power. And that's what Superman is. It's apologies once again for the change in angle. We ran out of space, which does happen. I'm not sure where I was. I believe I was talking about this and how great it was. It is a masterpiece. Find it when you can and read it. If you love Joseph Campbell, if you love Superman, if you love Carl Jung, if you are a fan of Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely, this is one of the masterpieces of the form. The next one is a part of my Batman collection. Batman is my favorite comic book character in the world. And this is, I think, one of the best recent modern stories. Scott Snyder, of course, working with Greg Capullo, who I mentioned from my Spawn diatribe earlier, returned to finish off the first part of Snyder's mythic recap of who Batman is. And much like Grant Morrison, outside of the magic theory and the Jungian philosophy and the psychological stuff, is a very similar writer in that he's taking everything that's worked for the character thus far and he's appreciating it. He's putting it together and stuff. Much like his 0 Year, which acts in contrast to Year One, which of course is one of the masterpieces of the form. It's a different approach to Batman's origins as a character. It's much more poppy and bright and optimistic and over the top, where that comic was mundane and so on. I think, this could be the perfect capstone for each of these characters. It sacrifices none of who the characters are in order to make more of their yin-yang relationship than it does. But equally, if there was never another Batman or Joker comic after this, I would be totally happy. It is appropriate that they die together. Of course, that's comics. It could never happen in real life. Or, it could never happen, stick, rather. This takes the vein of a cryptic narrative, a mystery, which, of course, is one of my favorite genres in the world. It really appeals to me, perhaps, because of how I view the world. I don't know. Joker's returned after having cut his face off, and, it might be that he's this supernatural, eldritch, Slender Man-esque type of character, but probably not, but possibly. And that mystery grows and grows, and the conflicts grow and grow as he drives the city crazy, as is, of course, the Joker's want. It is fantastic stuff. The art is immaculate. Of course, Snyder kept going after this, and I wasn't really a fan of the whole Gordon as Batman thing as much as some other people were. And I also felt that having Batman die and then come back so soon was probably a little bit too soon after Grant Morrison did the same thing about 5 years before that. So I'm taking this as the end of Snyder's Batman comic, even if the author himself disagrees. I do now feel bad for hopping on a bandwagon when I was like 18 or 19 when he started writing, and I sent him a hateful Twitter message. I apologize, sir. I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm sure it was a little confusing because it kind of came out of nowhere. Yes. This is, I think, the best modern interpretation of Batman. It's definitely better than Tom King's, who tends to get down in the dumps quite a bit, although I do like pieces of his work and his approach to Joker as well. And the artwork is always regularly fantastic. Yes. This is the perfect encapsulation of who Batman and the Joker are. So if you haven't read it, read it. And finally, because I know that I'm running out of space again, I had to add this to the library. This is J.W. Rinsler's Making of Alien book, which I think is his most recent installment in his Making of books. J.W. Rinsler is the high watermark name when it comes to making of books or exploring the making of films, of course, with his Star Wars making of books and with Planet of the Apes and things like that. He is so thorough and he is so investigatory, and the pieces of concept art and construction work and production photos and things like that, and the interviews that he dredges up, You will never find more complete histories of a film than you will with a J.W. Rinsler book. I can't wait to see what he does in the future, and I, in particular, can't wait to dive into this because Alien is one of my favorite films. Um, it combines elements of every one of my favorite genres. You know, there's a bit of action there and how visceral it is. A horror, of course, obviously, it's a haunted house narrative. Uh, Sci-fi, it of course is one of those things that is one of the words that I keep using like a buzzword, which is it's a perfect synergy. And this was so cheap on Amazon to pick up that I couldn't not pick it up after having seen it at Barnes and Noble for like well, the list price or a little bit over, which is about $80. Well, $60 asking, but $80 for what Barnes and Noble wants, which I think is criminal, even though I'm not going to stop going. Um, this, of course, traces the origins of Alien all the way through to its final form from Dan O'Banion's original approach to it, and when the project kind of stagnated, then Ridley Scott came on and revitalized it, much like what happened with Blade Runner. Later on, he seemed to have a habit of doing that. And of course, the involvement of H.R. Giger, which I'm sure we're going to see a lot of art from him in all its phallic glory. Yes, I legitimately cannot wait to start reading this, and I'm probably going to start tonight. So, yes. And that concludes my pickups for this week. Now, I would like to issue a disclaimer here so that you all know I am by no means rich. I am by no means, I am you know, I look like a rich white kid, but I am also not a kid. I am just blessed with this face. I'm almost 30. That's why I'm growing the beard back. I just work a lot. I work a ton, and I facilitate my hobbies in that way. You know, much like a lot of the collectors who are out there. I don't think, you know, I have a day job that satisfies all the financial needs that I have. It's not a pleasant, or it's a pleasant enough day job, but I have a day job that is, you know, just a, you know, relatively uncomplicated, we'll say, and from which I can make enough money to facilitate household stuff, my own hobbies, and of course, filmmaking itself as well, and writing about it, and of course, taking the girlfriend out on dates, and groceries and things like that, and so forth, in abundance, or in relative abundance, because next to people who are even middle class, I make nothing. But you know, this is all the accumulation of years. This stuff that you see, you know, years and careful budgeting, and you know, being a collector. That's the life of it. Thanks so much for joining me once again for one of these. There's much that I've picked up over like the last 5 or 6 months that I haven't done videos about, and that I will be doing videos about, including several of the larger box set releases that have come out since. I'll say just one thing. You may have noticed what looks like a garbage bag behind me. It is in fact not a garbage bag. It is in fact pieces of wardrobe still in the wrapping, having been unwrapped for a project that I have that I am very sincerely excited about and that you will be hearing more about very soon. So please stay tuned to The Filmist to hear more about that. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Oh, and also it's George Miller's birthday, so go have a drink and watch Mad Max Fury Road or Happy Feet to celebrate. Have a good night.